is what we call empirical research. That is, it's based on data. And typically what we do is we either obtain data from what we call secondary sources, that just data that naturally occurs, like, for example, stock prices. People might analyze that. Or sometimes you generate your own data, either through experiments, through surveys, through simulations. But you always come back to having a theory, and that from that theory, you're going to develop some hypotheses, and then you're going to use that data to test those hypotheses. And usually you're using some kind of statistical method or econometrics to test the hypotheses that you have, and to then, basically ascertain, do you think your hypothesis is correct? Now, there are some other types of research that people do. Some people do more of what I would call mathematical or analytical modeling, where they're trying to optimize something to make the best decision possible. So that's based a lot on mathematics, as I suggested. Other faculty design frameworks, perhaps more qualitative type of frameworks that help us understand business environments. And some of our law faculty use, say, past precedents in legal cases to help draw conclusions about new situations in the law. So as you can kind of see, people in all our departments do research, from accounting to business economics and public policy, business law and ethics, finance, marketing, management and entrepreneurship, and operations and decision technologies. I mentioned that we use theory to come up with our hypotheses. And you may say, well, where does this theory come from? People always ask me, what's a theory? I'm an accountant. People always say, what is accounting theory? Well, there is such a thing as accounting theory, but in research, we typically use theory from what I would call basic disciplines. This might be economics, psychology, sociology, decision theory, law. So our faculty not only are good business people, but they know a lot about basic discipline. And then you might say, well, how do you differ from a psychologist? How does what I do, I use a lot of psychology-based theory in my research, how does that differ from what the people over here in the psychology and brain sciences do? Well, they're doing kind of basic research that may apply to all individuals. Our faculty apply theory to business context or to questions that are important to business. So our research is inspired by complex real-world business problems. So, for example, and again, an accounting example, since I'm an accountant, psychologists may study how format or the type of text and words that you use, how that affects your decisions. So maybe charts versus diagrams affect your decisions in a different way, or very vivid wording matters in a different way than pallid wording. They would probably do that with undergraduate students and have generalizable results to a population as a whole. What we care about in business is what happens in a business context and what's different about a business context than what you might find with undergraduates. So we might look at institutional details. We might say, okay, I care about what happens in firms' annual reports or in their news releases to their shareholders. So you look at often the institutional setting or the individuals involved. When we do our research, what do we do with it? Well, we publish it. So we publish it mainly in academic journals, but we also publish in practitioner journals as well to try to get the implications out to people in the business world. So you might ask, well, why is research important to the Kelley School of Business or to business schools and business in general? And basically, this is where new knowledge comes from. So knowledge about any field, whether it be, physics or business, is not static. What you see in the textbooks came typically from some type of research somewhere. So for example, if you look in a finance textbook, they're going to talk about how to value stocks or how to value options. If you go back, many decades at this point, that was not in a textbook. That came from research papers that people in finance, academics in finance, basically did their research. So there's constant regeneration of new knowledge that comes from faculty's academic research. It also helps practitioners, managers in the day-to-day problems that they face. So for example, we had a group of faculty in our operations management group just this last year work with IU Health to come up with optimal staffing for their nurse staff. So obviously they were very short-handed with nurses, and a group of our faculty came in and basically came up with an optimal strategy for them in terms of staffing nurses. They got a nice publication out of it as well. And I would also say that you as students benefit from having our faculty engage in research. So again, right now, you're probably getting from some of your faculty, you may not be aware of this, research that's kind of hot off the press or just very recently published. So you're getting cutting edge research either done by our faculty or interpreted by our faculty from other people's research. You're also, I mentioned that our faculty develop frameworks. So they often use those frameworks in their class to help you analyze business situations. And then finally, a lot of what we do in research helps develop our critical thinking. And we pass that on to the students to say, look, this is the way research helps us structure our thinking in a way that's very structured, thoughtful, and we want you to be able to apply that as well. More practically, research does come into the rankings for business schools. So you see around the hallways whenever some of the rankings come out. For example, right now, Kelley is ranked number 8 in Financial Times in terms of research. That's worldwide, so that's quite an honor for us. Just a few statistics for you to show the magnitude of research that's done here at the Kelley School. Over the last 5 years, we've had 577 articles just in what we can consider top journals. And this was done by 162 of our faculty. 56 of our faculty have served in 85 editorial journal positions, and another 65 have won 120 competitive research awards. So our faculty is very busy in research, and they also are very good at what they do. I'm very proud of them, and I get to brag on them since I'm the Associate Dean of Research. So I will stop talking in a minute, but I want to go ahead and introduce our panel. As I mentioned, they will each talk about their research briefly, and then we will get into some other questions. So we will start out with Sophie Bacq. She's an associate professor in the Management and Entrepreneurship Department. We will then go to Dan Sachs. He's an associate professor in Business Economics and Public Policy. And then Lucy Yan will be our last speaker. She's actually an associate professor in Operations and Decision Technologies. I apologize, we've got a little typo up there. So I will turn it over to Sophie at this point.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Laureen, for this wonderful presentation of what research is about. I'm glad this is being recorded because this was phenomenal. So I'm happy to share a little bit about my research tonight. It's really a privilege to talk to more than my classrooms about the research that I care about and that keep me very busy, as you'll see in a minute. So take a moment to look at the logos that are on the slide here. And we don't have the interactive part at this moment, but I'm happy to go back to some of these examples later on in the Q&A. And think about what these organizations have in common. So you may be familiar with the Grameen Bank, a Nobel Peace Prize winner in 2006, that have been credited for amazing work in microfinance. Tom's Shoes, some of you may have heard of their buy one, give one model. Maybe Patagonia, some of you are wearing a jacket because we're still in winter. So you may be familiar with these brands. As Laureen said, we are business school professors and we teach you in the classroom, but we also research different kinds of business contexts. And the context that I'm deeply interested in and passionate about and curious about is the context of what we call social enterprises. So all of these organizations can be characterized as social enterprises, which means that they aim at addressing a social problem. So if you take the example of Grameen Bank, they try to deliver affordable, accessible financial services to individuals in very deep poverty conditions. That's a social issue, mainly in Bangladesh, and then they expand it. But they do that by using market-based means. They do achieve their mission by relying on markets and commerce. And so what these organizations do is that they actually trigger us to think about how everything that we know about business may be different when the founder of an organization is looking to address a needs that affect others who may be underprivileged populations or in poverty or other kinds of social needs, as opposed to trying to create the business for their own purpose, for self-interest, as we would say. And so if we go to the next slide, I favored here breadth over depth. So really, my intention is not to go over every one of these little boxes that represent fairly recent research papers. And as Laureen mentioned, when we're not in the classroom, when we're not preparing for class, we write a lot. We think and we write and we read others' research, we interpret it, we come up with hypotheses, and we try to develop new knowledge. And so here I want to give you a few examples of what I've been studying when it comes to these social enterprises that really combine a social mission good and a business logic, if you will. So I have a few animations, so Chloe, I'll keep you busy. So everything of my research is really centered on the social entrepreneurship domain. I'm really interested in understanding various aspects of what we call social entrepreneurship, which is the field that comprises of social enterprises, and their founders are called social entrepreneurs. And so, Chloe, if you can click a few times here, you'll see that I've worked at the individual level trying to understand what makes social entrepreneurs different. And so here, Laureen referred to basic sciences, basic disciplines in terms of psychology. Well, in that stream of research, in that column, I looked at psychology research, in particular, the trait of empathy, and how empathetic individuals tend to actually are more likely to become social entrepreneurs than those that are maybe less empathetic. And so, and I teach that in the class. I don't know if I have students in the room, in the Zoom room here, but we talk about empathy in the class. So that gets transported in the classroom as well. So at the organization level, I've been looking at the drivers of success of social enterprises, because what we're really interested in knowing is what makes a successful social enterprise, such that we can go back then to the classroom, to the practitioners, and say, these are the elements that actually will make a social enterprise more successful. I've also worked quite a bit, and this was the topic of my dissertation that I completed in 2012. So I've been really focused on that topic. The third one being governance. So how do strategic decision makers of social enterprises make decisions to acquire another company, to source certain types of resources and so on. The fourth one theme here is the one of community. So I'm really interested in unpacking how when we put social in front of the word enterprise or business, how does that change our relations to stakeholders, the different parties with whom a business interacts? And I think community actually is brought to the fore when we study social enterprises. And so I'm really interested in understanding that connection. And I'm mostly focusing on research on that fourth and then that fifth theme here, which is how does social entrepreneurship contributes to the alleviation of basic needs or provides life improvement and betterment under conditions of necessity. So you can see the breadth, like you can see so many themes that one can explore once we're really focused on what could be considered a niche topic, but the depth is really important here. And what's also important to point out is the fact that I've been focusing on trying to create that new knowledge, both from a conceptual or theoretical perspective that Laureen talked about, and an empirical perspective as well. And so I see theories and methods as tools in my little toolbox that can help me understand the phenomenon through the lens of the question I'm posing. So Chloe, if you want to click twice here, you'll see that, yes, indeed, I do more empirical research than theoretical research, but still in management and entrepreneurship, we have a plethora of research theories that maybe, I don't know, I'm curious to hear what Lucy and Dan say about theory, but we really have a really large toolbox of theories, hence why I've been busy trying to develop new theories to understand social entrepreneurship. Also being a very new field of research that gave me a lot of opportunities to actually have fun with theories. And so I don't want to take too much of the time, but if we go to the next slide, what I highlighted, and we can click 5 times here if you five times here if you don't mind, Chloe. I highlighted some research questions as we discussed with Laureen. It may be interesting to see what questions I'm actually posing and trying to answer. And so if we look at the one, I talked about that one. How are social entrepreneurs different in practice? Well, what I did with my psychology concept of empathy, I went and I interviewed and I administered questionnaires to about 300 prospective social entrepreneurs to really understand what their differences were from a psychological perspective. So in terms of the number 3 here, how do entrepreneurs make strategic decisions? I've been really engaged in a longitudinal case, so collecting data from a social enterprise in France, trying to understand how the organization is governed and makes decisions about acquiring, so going through a merger and acquisition of a traditional company, and seeing if there are conflicts of values between the social enterprise mission and the organization being acquired. So that's just a few examples, but I'm happy to go back to any of them during the Q&A. I want you to take away the plethora of possibilities that we can actually dig in as researchers. And so my final slide talks about how my research has had an impact. And first, I wanted to emphasize that it's important to disentangle research excellence from research impact. And hopefully we can be, all of us, at Kelley, high on both, right? And so a few examples of what I mean by research excellence, looking at the metrics. Well, as Laureen explained, what we're aiming to do is, after the research process and creating that new knowledge, is we want to disseminate that knowledge in our scientific journals, right? And so, Chloe, you can click 2 times here. What excellent research would look like would be a pretty high number, or as high as possible, of high-level publications. That's what Laureen mentioned when she mentioned, or astronomers faculty numbers in terms of publishing in the very prestigious highly legitimate journals in a certain amount of time. But also receiving awards from professional associations or journals that may elect your article as being an excellent and standing out of a year of publications, for instance, from that journal. So that's what research excellence is to me. And I think of research impact then, if you want to click then 3 times here, thank you, Chloe. In terms of the audience, right? So I'm always thinking in terms of having impact on the research of others. And one way to look at that is the number of citations. So think about, well, I published my research on the empathy of social entrepreneurs, but is that having an impact on the other social entrepreneurship researchers? Are they reading it? And are they finding the research useful? Because if they're finding it useful, they will cite my research in their own research study publication. So that's one audience for sure for whom I want to have an impact. But the other one is using a framework or finding in the classroom. I talked about empathy. I've also been told that some colleagues at USC Marshall use one of my recent frameworks to map the different stakeholders that are involved in a social entrepreneurship initiative. So they do that in the master's classroom, which was really wonderful for me to hear. And finally, I think impact on society, of course, the topic being really tied to societal issues in my case is dear to my heart, but also very meaningful given the topic I'm interested in. And so being featured in national newspapers or being used, your research findings being used by practitioners and policymakers. And so to me, that's as important. And I have a final little image here that that shows the research team, both North American, so Canadian and US-based scholars traveling to the townships of South Africa and trying to address the question, how does social entrepreneurship have addressed basic human needs? And so we had some hypotheses that we tested in the field with, you can see this lady there in the middle. She's a restaurant owner in the townships. And we are in the process of publishing that research, and we've written a practitioner report for the NGO, the local NGO in Cape Town. And to me, that's really important to keep in mind. So I'll stop here. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks so much, Sophie. Let's turn now to Dan Sachs.
Okay, thank you. Sophie is a tough act to follow. She's had such an impressive research career. Let me tell you a little about what I work on. The main area that I study is called social insurance. So you should think of this broadly as all kind of government-funded insurance programs. Mainly, I work on health and old age insurance. So what's a business school professor doing working on government insurance? Well, you should think of the US government basically as an insurance company with an army. There's just a huge amount of money in social insurance programs, something like $2.7 trillion last year. So that alone, I think, makes it an important topic of study. But it turns out also that although the government funds most social insurance programs, many social insurance benefits are provided by private companies. So for example, nearly every health insurance program that the government funds has a privately provided component. The Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, is basically entirely delivered by private health insurance companies. Medicare, our old age insurance program, has many private plans, as does Medicaid, our insurance program for low-income Americans. So this is a big area of research, and people working in this area, I would say, ask and try to answer 3 very broad questions. The first is, if our goal is to provide insurance, how good a job are we doing? How effectively does government actually insure against life's risks? So those risks are things like illness, which health insurance partially covers, job loss, which unemployment insurance covers, outliving your wealth, which Social Security covers, but also maybe the biggest risk of all is the accident of birth, where you born into fortunate circumstances or not. And we can think of a lot of what modern governments do as providing some insurance against all the risks of birth. So that's one set of questions. How good a job are we doing on that dimension, the primary intended goal? Of course, economists love to talk about unintended consequences, and I am no exception to that rule. So a kind of rule or about social insurance is that it is almost always more generous for low-income Americans. That's just a standard goal, that we want our government programs to be progressive. But if you think about that, that means you get bigger benefits from the government, more generous insurance, if your income is lower. And so that creates an incentive for people to work less, and possibly also to save less. And the fact that people are responding to those incentives does not necessarily invalidate the programs, but still we would like to know how this progressivity of social insurance affects people's decisions, especially about working and saving. Finally, in a way, putting these first two questions together, we'd like to know how efficiently our government spends funds spent. If we're spending almost $3 trillion on these programs, we should be getting a lot for it. But are there other ways of designing the programs that either do a better job delivering the benefits to people who need them most, or have fewer adverse effects in terms of unintended consequences? So that's the big picture here. On the next slide, I'll tell you about one area where I've done a lot of work. So much of my work with co-authors is about a program called the Social Security Earnings Test. So I think you are all too young to claim Social Security, but once you turn 62, you can claim Social Security. It's a retirement income program, but actually after you keep working, after you claim your Social Security benefits, you can keep working. But for every $1 you earn, you lose 50 cents in benefits. That's called the earnings test. And the idea is to make the program progressive, that we want to have more benefits for people who actually don't have income. But effectively, that looks like a very aggressive tax. For every $1 of earnings, you lose 50 cents in benefits. Now, it turns out a subtle feature of this, a quirk of how the law was written, is that once you turn 66 or stop working entirely, you get all the benefits back. So this looks like a big tax to most people. You earn $1 and then you have to give 50 cents of your benefits back. And my research in a series of papers has shown that this earnings test dramatically reduces the employment of elder Americans. It's a very large effect. They're less likely to work at all. And if they do work, they reduce how much they earn. We think this is an important set of results because, to us at least, this policy just looks like a disaster. It has all of the downsides of a tax, meaning it causes people to work less, but it has none of the upside. The government actually doesn't get any benefit from this tax because they give all the money back later. So I wish I could tell you that we wrote a bunch of papers pointing out how poorly conceived this policy is, and we convinced Congress to change the law. That's a work in progress. That's the impact that we would like to have from this research, but these kind of changes take a long time. So this is meant to illustrate one kind of area of research of mine, and also kind of more broadly, the things that economists study. We look at big social programs. We ask both, do they work as intended, but also what are the unintended consequences? And here, the unintended consequences look pretty serious. Okay, I have one more example for you on the next slide. Another line of my research is about the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare. This is the health insurance expansions under President Obama. Very complicated law, many parts. One part of it is that it provided very generous subsidies for people to pay their health insurance premiums. So these are hundreds of dollars a month or more. Some people get big enough subsidies that they can buy a free plan. They pay $0. Other people don't get a free plan, but they still get very generous subsidies. So for a variety of reasons, you might think it matters to have a totally free plan versus a plan that costs a few dollars a month. And again, with co-authors, my research shows, in fact, that there are very large effects of making coverage completely free. And you might think that's because like everyone loves free and they just like rush to sign up for a free product. That's actually not quite what's going on. It's that if you have to pay it all, there's just a ton of paperwork that you have to complete. So in addition to signing up online for coverage, you have to fill out some forms with your insurer and like put a check in the mail. And by the way, you sign up for coverage on December 15th. They send you the invoice and you get it around Christmas, and then they have to get it back by New Year's. So it's really a very tight timeline. And the benefit of free plans is that there's none of that paperwork. The hassle cost of like actually paying gets eliminated. And as a result, many more people sign up on time. So there's kind of an obvious implication here, both for policymakers and for businesses. On the policy side, we don't want to force people to pay very small premiums. That probably doesn't have big benefits in terms of revenue or making sure people who need insurance sign up for it. And it potentially has large costs. And California, for many years, had a policy in place which unintentionally required everyone to have a minimum premium of at least $1. And they recently changed that law. They basically put their state subsidies up to cover that last dollar. And they had many reasons for doing it, but at least the lobbyists arguing for that change cited our research as one of the reasons. A second implication is for business, which is it's easy for businesses to add on small fees. In the health insurance context, one reason you would do that is if you provide more benefits than the law says you have to. So maybe in addition to providing healthcare, you also provide vision coverage or chiropractor care. Those seem like sensible things to add, but in this context, they would guarantee that people face some positive price and make it harder to finalize signing up for coverage. So our research would say that you should be very careful with add-ons like that. So these are the kind of things that I work on. I have sort of a broader set of policies, but of projects rather. But I thought it would be useful for you to hear kind of in depth about 2 areas of research.
Thanks so much, Dan. Let's move on to Lucy.
Thank you, Laureen, and thank you, Sophie, and thank you, Dan, for your great discussions regarding your research. I learned a lot, and I know it is not planned, but I feel so lucky that I introduced myself, my research after Sophie and Dan, because Sophie mentioned about social entrepreneurship and Dan talking about healthcare, and my research is a combination of social and healthcare. So I'm from the information systems domain and the OTT department. Laureen earlier mentioned about what is research, and to be honest, that was my question when I first joined the PhD program. I asked my mentor what was IS research, and the answer is very straightforward. Anything related to IT and help us to push the envelope further, that could be considered as the considered as type of the IS research. And to that end, you should consider that the field of information systems is by nature multidisciplinary. So we have people doing all kinds of research involving information technologies. For example, we are such a big group, and we have faculty members doing artificial intelligence and understanding the artifact implementation adoption rate, how to improve the adoption and the effectiveness of the technologies for business operations. And we collecting data to understand how to using those information technology collected data to help us making better decisions. And of course, we do design science aspect, design the better IT system so that our life could be better. And there are many more concepts in the domain of information systems. And because I'm from the audit department and I'm teaching this semester, so my assumption is that people know how to do search. So, on our website, we have all kinds of different types of information systems research listed on our department website. And if you're interested, welcome to search for that. And to that end, my research is pretty much focused on the social media applications in the nonprofit context. I know a lot of people talking about Amazon, talking about YouTube, talking about Facebook, talking about Instagram, how people become visible on the platform, how to generate revenues, how to make this tool more efficient so that the brand name can be spread out more quickly. My interest is not about that for profit. I look at the nonprofit context, such as the healthcare and humanitarian operations. And echo back to Laureen's mentioned earlier regarding the methodologies. Yes, I'm using my main tool is about empirical research. So I'm collecting large scale data and conducting network analysis to review the insights and discover the hidden patterns of the internet footprint. Anyone, all of you, I know you are using the social media every day, and every single click and every single data that you contribute to the platforms, there's a footprint left, and we can review, we can detect what's going on, and from that we can better describe what kind of personnel you are and what kind of activities you're going to do next. Okay, next slide, please. So typically, so my focus is on the social media, and the social media, you can consider that is a group of the applications based on the technology of Web 2.0. The key point or the most important aspect for the social media application is the UGC, the way that we become socialized, the way we can communicate, and we can establish communication ties. Click, please. So that the social trends in the year of the social media age is that individuals just use social media based tools to chat, to communicate, to collaborate, to work together. And every time they engage in a conversation, they can share information and they can exchange experiences and ask for knowledge sharing, so that in such a way that the work can be completed more efficiently, and also people can always support each other more efficiently. Next click, please. But those things are very common and widely studied in a for-profit environment. Okay, but there is a particular industry called the professional industry, which have very high information asymmetry. You think about healthcare, or you think about the mechanic workers. They know more, they know how to deal with the car. If the car is broken on the road, I have no idea how to change the tires. Or if something went wrong, I have to call the toller to call my car. And also for the healthcare, if we have some symptoms, we are relying on the expert's advice. We are looking for the help from the healthcare professionals, the doctors, the physicians, the licensed nurses. They are more trained than us, and they know what's going on, and then they can help us to solve the problem. So this type of industry is called as the healthcare, and the characteristics of this kind of industry is that they know more than us. Next, please. And then to that end, click please. There's a huge concern regarding, okay, so when we have this opportunity of social media to exchange our healthcare related information, what would happen next? I started to be interested in this domain, let's say a decade ago or 10 years ago, more formally. That time, there's a high resistance in the healthcare industry because they worry about information exchanged among the users, among the patients. And what if the information is not right? What if the information is incomplete? And lots of outcomes will be made, a lot of decisions will be made incorrectly based on those exchanged incorrect information. Therefore, there's a high resistance, and the people always talking about that online healthcare communities is a fade. After 2-3 years, they're gonna die. But we see what's going on. It's become more and more popular. So what people doing online is pretty much talking to each other, sharing their information regarding their healthcare activities, and also exchange their treatment experience. So to that end, we can consider them as the 3 types of things. One is about, okay, what are the content they exchanged online? What about the information? What kind of treatment experience is changed? Those things are embedded in the reviews, in the text messagings, and the forum posts. And also people express their carings to the others. For example, that would be the emotional support, encouragement for the others to stick with the treatment so that the better outcome could be achieved later. So that is kind of things that we can always study to see, okay, are we going to promote certain kind of thing at a certain time of the moment so that the patients can hang out, can survive from certain disaster, and they can have the better outcome from their engagement of their online participations. In addition to that, also we can identify, okay, so we want to make friends. but there's so many people out there, so many patients like us out there. What kind of individuals should we establish this social relationship to? And from that, we can start to have this kind of social engagement and a social conversation, and eventually all the parties can be benefit from this kind of social relationships. So that is another thing that we can explore in the online healthcare community as well. And eventually think about platforms. Almost all the online platforms for healthcare are free to use. So there's no profit embedded. And it really depends on users or patients' voluntary participation. But why should I help you? If someone always waiting for others to helping them, then the supporting pool gonna dry. So how are we going to design the mechanism to encourage individuals to not only receiving helps from the others, but also contribute to support others? So there is another different strain that we can study as well in the regarding the healthcare online platforms. Next slide, please. Okay, so my main research is about the healthcare, but not just about the healthcare, as I mentioned earlier. So it's also talking about the disaster management. For example, American Red Cross, when something happened, then a lot of how the information can be spread out using the social media channels. And if there are multiple channels out there, how different channels can communicate to each other and coordinate in such a way that information can be sent out in a more efficient way. Click, please. And in addition to that, nowadays we're not about, let's say, lack of the information. More often what we are facing is that we have too much information, no time to consume. That is what we call as information overload. And we have too many options out there, and we don't know which options would do better outcome for us. And that is the whole idea behind the recommender systems. And if you look at going back to see what has happened in the past, if you look at the Netflix, more than 80% of the clicks on the Netflix are actually driven from the recommendation on the homepage. And for YouTube, more than 75 ranges, depending on the category, 75 to 90% of the traffic actually are driven from the recommendation on the homepage. So to recommend the right content to the right group of individuals is the key for the business success, regardless whether it is a nonprofit or profit. So to that end, I'm not only understanding what's going on, understanding the users' behaviors and help them to get to be healthier and have better health outcome, but also I'm interested in developing the IT artifacts to help the business platforms to make better recommendations to meet users' needs. Next slide, please. So to that end, let me first talking about the next click, please. So to that end, I'm actually the sort of doing the very risk kind of the research, because a lot of people think at very beginning, they think the social media for healthcare is just a joke, and no one they could not survive. And then thinking about using social media platforms to distribute the information for disaster management would not be that efficient. But the reality, my research shows that there's a value, and we actually can show that those online platforms can do better than the offline channels in terms of helping each other, that the victims, like the patients, like the users, to help each other. Because of that, myself is known in the field as the online healthcare community lady. So they always joke me, oh, that is the lady for online healthcare communities. And because I'm sort of doing the pioneer work in this area. And that's the reason why I received several research awards, like including the Young Researcher Award and the Early Career Award, to be recognizing my research in the past. And also I have received the best paper awards and the nominations because of those, the new insights that can add to this field and push the envelope further. And also for the, because of my work, I'm the associate editors at the top tier journals, information systems in my field, as well as the senior editor at the production and operation management, because I'm doing both type of the research as well. my group, the information systems department, is big. So my colleagues are as productive, if not more, as me, and they are great. So since 2018 to 2021, even though we're suffering from the COVID, my colleagues, including myself, we're very productive, and we're working very hard on the research and to publish the top tier journals. So we have 30 plus publications at top tier journals. And we have our colleagues have won multiple research awards, and we have multiple editorial board positions. And we chaired and co-chaired conferences and workshops and host research seminars to distribute our research insights. And it is our hope that because we're doing very related to information technologies that is very practical, it is our hope that our research outcome can be transformed into the practice and somehow can reshape the business practice. Just give you one example. You probably receive a lot of coupons from the channel. And do you know why you receive those channel coupons and why that particular amount you receive? And if you have friends that also receive the coupon, you should compare about the amount. Probably you have the higher amount of money in the discount compared with your friends. And that is one type of the research we do in our field, information systems. We differentiate who you are, we describe who you are, we classify which social group you belong to, and we predict the chance that to what extent you're going to make the purchase or do what we want you to do. So that is one example, but of course, we're doing more than that, and it's a broader umbrella. At the end, I want to emphasize that don't be narrowed down by my research area, which is very niche in the information systems. To the end, information system is a multidisciplinary area that anything that you're interested and have the information technology involved, talk to us. We're interested to work with you and doing research on that. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lucy. So I think you've seen a breadth of research areas here, and they did tie together nicely. I'm not sure I totally thought of that when I put these three faculty together, but you can see some of the research that is done by faculty. I am going to just briefly, before we jump into the next part of the presentation, mention that we do have a doctoral program here at Kelley. There's obviously doctoral programs at other universities. And if you've ever thought about doing a PhD in business, or if you just want to talk more about it, please reach out. There's some contacts here, some websites, and you can always reach out to me as well. I'm up on the dean's floor, and we'd be happy to talk to you. But we're going to turn a little bit now to that focus on what brought these three faculty members to choose academics, and what some of their advice happens to be for those of you, either if you are thinking about maybe down the road you might be interested, or if you're not. So let me start with a question about what led them to choose an academic career, specifically as a tenure track faculty member that does have research involved. If you were employed in the business world before, did that play a role at all in your decision? So let me start maybe with Dan on this one. And if you could provide some insights from your path, and then we'll go and talk to Sophie.
I guess I should say, possibly I got into an academic career for the wrong reasons. So at some point in college, I woke up for a class or a job at like 6 in the morning, and I didn't like that. And I heard that professors have flexible hours. And so I thought that's the job for me. Well, as I subsequently learned, and as others have put it to me, it is the most flexible 100-hour-week job you could ask for. So, you know, I started working at 8 this morning. It's almost 7 now. Most days are not that long, but it is that wasn't the right reason to get involved. But fortunately, I discovered that there are many things about this career that I really love. So I think for me, and maybe for many, the most important reason to do this job is that I really like ideas. I like reading about ideas and talking about them. I like thinking about other people's ideas and sort of developing my own. And then especially I love seeing how seemingly unrelated ideas can be combined into something new that you might be able to then explore in the world through data analysis. So much of this work is working with ideas. That's true on the research side, of course, like our research is about developing and testing ideas, but it's also totally true on the teaching side. I mean, I think of teaching as about explaining and exploring ideas that are well known to economists, but not known in general and valuable to students. And it helps, I think, that the ideas I've found most interesting are related to data analysis, economics, business. There's, I think, a lot of interest in hearing about those ideas from students, from businesses, from policymakers. And so doing research can be kind of lonely, where you sort of think about, you're in your own head a lot of the time. But at least in this particular line of work, as a business school professor, there's a lot of opportunities to share ideas and have some impact.
Okay, Sophie or Lucy, either one of you want to jump in with some thoughts?
Well, I worked at the airline industry before I joined the PhD program. So at that time, 15 years ago, it's pretty much like the high-tech technology. Those company was not that in the strategic position yet, and technology department was not that well received, perceived, just like what we have right now. So during that period of time, what I do is pretty much like, okay, assign the task and then manage the data, retrieve the data to create queries to finish the task. That's it. And every day just repeating this particular routine, and it's kind of boring. And then I was wondering, could the life could be could I have something else? The life would be more colorful. And then my friend told me that you probably try the school, the academic. But the reason they recommended was not because of doing something new, but because of there's a summer term and there's winter break, so that we have more time to enjoy. Then without further thought, I just applied for PhD and then continue my training and then join the academic. Just like Dan mentioned earlier, well, it might not be a good reason to pursue this career, but the payoff is really fruitful. So I quite much enjoy the freedom of doing the research, not being asked to do stuff, but be creative, thinking about something that I like, I'm interested in, and then explore the problems. And eventually, when I solve the problem and see the outcome, that the fulfillment is, that's great. That's really great. And then I think that is the best gift that I would ever receive from the work for my research. And I don't know, maybe Sophie, you have something to add?
Yes, I'll add shortly. Thank you, both of you. I'll add shortly my experience to highlight the diversity of paths that can lead to a research career. And also a little bit unusual, I have to mention that I earned my PhD in Europe at the Université Catholique de Louvain in Belgium. And so I stumbled upon research as I was a teaching assistant. So I got into the teaching assistant position as I wanted to teach after earning my master's in business engineering. And I think the teaching vibe, I don't know if there's research about that. I'm sure there is. Both my parents are now retired teachers, second grade and then middle school. And I had this teaching core in me that I wanted to explore. And so I earned that teaching position. And the deal was that I would teach for 20 hours a week at the university where I graduated from. And for 20 or more hours a week, I would engage in research, which is a little unusual, I have to say. But once I was exposed to the academic research, which is not something I read actually much during my master's, I got really hooked by the activity that a research career is involved, meaning reading such articles, thinking, the critical thinking skill that Laureen mentioned at the beginning, bouncing ideas with my professors and fellow PhD students, attending conferences, presenting those ideas, getting feedback. And so after 2 years of that teaching and research juggling, which I'm back and now, as you figured, we all work long hours doing the teaching and the research, I earned a national grant to focus on the research and 100%. And that was just, that was the dream. And then I earned a PhD and then went on that faculty career because I knew that would combine the research and teaching interests.
Thank you, all of you. I think one thing that kind of came out here is there's a lot of different paths to an academic career. And you know, some people go out and work, and there's different opinions about that in terms of how that benefits your work here as an academic. I also think, you know, probably most of us did have this idea of, oh, we don't like to get up at 8 o'clock in the morning a little bit, but that certainly isn't the reason to go into this career. Let me go on and pose a second question, and that is, what's your advice for students considering a research career in academia? So in your opinion, what makes a successful researcher? What have you found to be most challenging about research? Lucy, you want to start us out on that one?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Laurie. I worked with many PhD students in the past because, well, I worked at least 9 PhD students mentoring with them, and then also work on this stuff. I observed that the most important thing for the PhDs, or when you consider about pursuing the PhD education, be ready for challenges, and to that end, you need to be mental strong. You know, the research is colorful, it's fantastic, but it is very challenging. There's no doubt that everyone's so super good, so smart, and there's no question regarding whether you can do it or not. It is a question about whether you can continuously doing the research for long term, especially there's so many storms on the way, and then there are so many barriers on the way. So be strong mentally, be prepared for accepting the imperfectness, because nothing could be perfect. You have to accept this, and also accept the fact that there are more failures than the success in the research. And I'm pretty sure that Sophie and Dan would agree with me that we have so many rejections before we hit acceptance, and that is something, you know, you have to be mentally strong to get through it. So for those of you thinking about pursuing the PhD or finding out the academia jobs, that is something that you need to be aware of. And the thing, I think, the most characteristics that for the successful career, I consider as 2 of them. One is about curiosity. So always looking for challenges, always looking for some new ideas or new methods, or the opportunity to explore something you have no idea before. So get out of your comfort zone. So the curiosity always plays a very important role in your success. And in addition to that is time management. Don't believe that if someone say, okay, if you can get up at 8 and then finish job at 7, then you can enjoy the rest of your life. No, well, to me, I'm working 24/7, and I would have sleepless night if I cannot solve the problem. And I always wonder about what if my code is not working, and what about I cannot get the model converged. So doing the research is kind of, you need to have a good time management, and things will pile up. Things will not reduce. You're going to have more and more workload on your shoulder, and then the more successful, more service or more responsibility you're going to bear. So that is another aspect I see as the importance for the successful career. And then the most challenging part of the research, I probably mentioned that already. So to me, I consider about the creativity and the curiosity for the continuous effort to take challenges, to explore the new things, new methods, new areas. And that is, you think about that, you have to keep learning. and that is challenging. And you have to enjoy this learning process. Think about a different way. It is challenging, but it could be very pleasant journey to enjoy. Thank you.
Other comments?
Okay, thank you, Dan. So I'd like to add two things. One part I'd like to react to Lucy's sharing about time management and how when you're successful, things pile up because you're successful, so you're asked to do more things, maybe review for more journals or become an associate editor of 1 or 2 journals. I didn't quite follow if you're associate editor of 2, Lucy, but you know, that is a lot of work. But at the same time, I'm amazed how we get better at it. When I was a very junior first year assistant professor, I was at another institution before and I was being mentored by an associate professor. And we had this meeting and she was sharing with me how her day went and what was for her week. I was like, there is no way I could do that in a month, right? But I'm doing all these things today. And so what's fascinating in that career to me is that it's a constant learning curve, but that can be very positive for those of us, and I'm sure all of you are like that in the audience tonight, that have like this growth mindset. They're ready to learn because it goes with curiosity, right? And so it's a lot, but I think it helps us grow and we actually get better at it. So it is a craft in some ways. And so in terms of the success factors for such a career, I have a recipe with 3 ingredients because I'm a terrible cook. So 3 is probably what I can handle. And I wrote them down before Lucy spoke. I have curiosity. I think that's a character trait that is needed in this profession, always asking questions, wanting to know more, being dissatisfied with what we currently know. I would couple that with passion for a topic. So in my case, it's a phenomenon. It's a kind of organization that I'm really fascinated about, and I'm fascinated about their leaders or social entrepreneurs. But it could be a theory. Like I have, in management entrepreneurship group department, I have colleagues that more specialize about a certain theories of strategic management and how organizations should be, that's called optimal distinctiveness. Shout out to my colleague Eric Zhao, because I saw that his book is coming out in a few weeks, so I'm excited for him. But this concept is really about how corporations should be different from others to compete, but still kind of similar, not to be perceived as outliers and nobody wants to purchase from them. Maybe not sure the definition, but this is to say that you can have a passion for kind of enterprise or kind of social media platform, or, I see Lucy and I had shared interest in the nonprofit world. It can be for other aspects, but passion is critical. And finally, not really mentioned explicitly, but implicitly so far, liking to write, like enjoying writing. I think that's critical because we spend a lot of time writing and editing or drafts and welcoming feedback. And so if you don't like writing, that may be more challenging. And it's a craft, like you be a better writer. But if you dislike it entirely, that may be more challenging than for others that do like it.
All right. Dan, did you want to add anything, or did that
Yeah,
cover
maybe
it?
briefly. I mean, I agree with everything Lucy and Sophie said. And so just one more piece of advice, I guess, if you think you might be interested. So, for me, I think this is the best job I could possibly have. And I think many people who stick with it feel that way, but it's, I think, not a great job for everyone. Like if you don't like reading and writing all day and working with data, it's not going to be a good job for you. And it's a huge investment to get a PhD or to go down this path. So there are many steps you can take along the way to figure out if you would like it. And so getting involved with research early on not only will help you get into PhD programs, but also may be extremely informative for you whether this is like a path that you're actually going to enjoy. So do what you can early to figure out like if you would like this kind of day-to-day life of reading and writing, teaching and publishing.
Thanks. I think one thing that comes across with all 3 of the faculty here is the passion they feel for what they do and the curiosity and the interest. So, you know, when Dan, I think, mentioned, you know, the 100-hour weeks, it's not that we necessarily work 100-hour weeks every week, but there are weeks if you're working on a research question and you can't sleep because you really want to find the answer. So, so there is just this natural curiosity and a lot of self-selection of people who choose to go into this profession, or those that just love digging into questions and finding out about things. The last question that I'll ask before we look at some of the questions that are in the Q&A is, what would you want students to know if they're not interested in a research career in academia? What would you want them to understand about academic research? And Sophie, maybe I'll have you lead off on this one.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I feel we've shared a lot. What I was going to share on that point was more of the life side, but in a very positive way. I think the way to summarize what we do, as you could see the diversity, and I'm so glad we were brought on from, you know, obviously different departments. So you will get to specialize at some point, but that will be your choice. Another thing that will be your choice is the kind of research questions, right? So Lucy is doing social media and she's choosing, there's a ton of social media and corporations, she's choosing nonprofits and she's carving out a niche for her, but she picked it out of her own interest. So you're making a lot of decisions that can set you up for success. Another kind of decision you're making, and we haven't really talked about that, and I didn't emphasize all of my wonderful co-authors when I presented, but you get to choose who you work with, right? So you have departmental colleagues, of course, but I have a very long list of co-authors. I think I put it together recently. It's maybe 50 co-authors around the globe, part of it because I did get my my PhD degree out of Europe. But these become long-term relationships and friends. And so we have fun, like they're like us, right? They like to really being, to digging deeper and being really into a topic and solving a puzzle, which is really what we grapple with most of the time. You get to set your own schedules, right? So that can be, the downside is like there is no clear boundaries, but many jobs are like that. It's highly, you know, highly flexible in that respect. So to me, who study entrepreneurship, it's a little bit like being an entrepreneur, right? I choose my baby, my startup, that would be my research project. I choose my partners, my co-founders. I choose my schedule. I work hard like an entrepreneur, but I have guarantee of a nice paycheck too. So this is a very, if you like the little recipe, if you can relate to some of these skills that we've talked about, and if you're curious, I really encourage you to dig deeper, because there's a lot that we don't know when we see professors in, you know, in the classroom, and the research world to me is very fascinating. It's a great community. We haven't talked about conferences too, but there are like platforms online these days, but otherwise in person, where you can disseminate and have really fruitful exchanges with colleagues. So you're connecting on a global scale as well. So so that's the upside. So that's what I want to share. I'll stop here.
So Dan or Lucy, what would you want to say about academic research, even if somebody is not interested in going into academia?
Well, I guess I would say, and as you've heard today, but even beyond that, there's academic research on everything. And some of it may even be useful to you. So you can learn something, even if you're not interested in the professional side of it, for your own benefit, for many questions from consulting the academic research. And when you do that, I guess one thing that I think all academics know, but is easy to lose track of, is that, like, not only is there research on everything, there's a lot of research on everything. It's very rare that there's only one paper, or that one paper is the final word on it. So, you know, as you consult the academic research, it's often wise to sort of get a feel for multiple things for where kind of the broad consensus is, or the balance of evidence.
Lucy, do you have anything to add?
Well, just 2 cents. I think a lot of our, even despite regardless whether we're doing the empirical, whether we're doing the analytical or the behavioral type of the research, most of our research conducted in the business schools can be converted into the practice in the industry. I'm not saying about my research, don't blame me. So, but if you complain about, okay, your the switching cost has been increased from one platform to another platform. What if you're complaining about, okay, the YouTube premium charge has increased from this amount to another amount? You know, there's a reason behind that. And the reason is actually converted from our research findings. So our lives, regardless whether you are into the academia job or academia, yes or not, you know, your every aspect of your life are actually affected by our research findings. And to be good or to be not that good, but that is the reality. So we are contributing to the industry practice, business practices, by revealing what we have understand of users' behaviors about the policy and decisions. And then our whole goal is just try to make our world better. And that, I think that is the value of our business school of research contributed to the entire society. And we have value. And I perceive our value even higher than those ones done in the engineering schools, because sometimes, you know, they, yes, they're doing a pretty good job, but it is too complicated to turn into the large scale implementations.
Well, thank you for your thoughts on those three questions. I think hopefully that this has provided some insights to those of you in the audience about academic research. There, as was said, there's a lot of research going on. Sometimes, you know, one thing that we do a lot is really evaluate the quality of studies. So I guess one thing I would say is, I think, I can't remember if it was Sophie or Dan who brought up looking at a lot of different studies, and sometimes there's studies called meta-analyses that really, in a very systematic way, look at a lot of studies to come to the what the literature as a whole says. So sometimes you'll read articles and it may, you know, it may be about business research, it may be about medical research. And, you know, this study says X, another study says not X. And a lot of times when you dig into it, the quality of the research that is done makes a huge difference. So we have very high quality researchers here. I know from looking at their papers in detail about that. So there were a few questions that were in the Q&A, and maybe even more now. I'm going to start with one that's more general, and then there were a number that were more directed towards Sophie. But one question that was more general was a question about how do the students get involved in some of these research opportunities. I will make a general statement and then I'll let some of the others talk. One suggestion I would have is when you have a class with someone and they talk about research, and you can tell that they engage in research. I think talking to faculty after class, faculty love to talk about their research, and going in and saying, hey, this area of research or this area of business really interests me. How do I get involved? And faculty may not have opportunities for you to work with them. The other thing that I think we're trying to work on as well is trying to get a sense of students who do want to work on research and what areas they're interested in. So I will work with the undergraduate office to try to make that happen and have a way that if you are interested that you can sign up and we can have some discussions about that. But I will see if either of the other three have any thoughts about that. I covered it all, huh?
I agree with that. I mean, I think what I would say, in addition, is that if you think you might be interested, moving sooner is always better, because like it's helpful to build relationships with faculty. And also, I'm very happy to work with undergraduates in research, and I've had really fruitful experiences doing that. But I find that there's a learning curve and a bit of a training on my part. And so like sort of the sooner we get started, the sooner that can become a productive relationship.
Yeah, adding to that is a little bit, if you're taking classes in a particular department, then you are interested in something in that particular area, but not with this instructor. No worry, just reach out. The instructor would connect you to someone who are more familiar with your interest area, and then establish the connection. So for example, in our department, the OT department, we have those lectures, and clinical professors, they teach very huge classes, and they always receive the requests from students, and they reach out to our tenure track faculty members, say, hey, here is the student who is interested in this particular topic. Are you interested to work with the student? And we're always taking we always take it and they say, okay, let's have a discussion. So it is great that you happen to take the class with a particular individual that you have interest to work with. It is also okay that you can reach out to someone else who can help you to build the bridge to the one who have expertise in it. So that is, I see no barriers in our Kelley school in terms of working on the research projects with undergraduate students. And that will also help you to get some benefits for graduate education as well, if you are thinking about a higher education.
Okay, I think there's a couple of more specific questions here for Sophie. So we've got a few more minutes. So I will read at least, see how many we can get through. So one says, in wake of research on responsible business conduct, do you think that there is merit in understanding changes in governance structures of traditionally pro-profit companies which endeavor to become inclusive and engage in creating positive social change? If you want me to repeat any of that, let me know.
No, thank you, Laureen. Yes, this was a very thoughtful and pointed question, and luckily you read it really well, and I have it in front of my eyes. I actually, reacted to the questions I could, so I hope everybody saw it, but I'm wondering if you all could see my response. I didn't mean for it to be
sorry.
No, don't worry. But I'll just say briefly that absolutely, I think the short answer is yes, lots of merit into that. The reason I focused on social enterprises is that I think they're a great, when it comes to governance structures, they're a great laboratory to explore what happens in terms of the board's composition and maybe some other governance tools that they're not in your textbook yet. What happens to these structures when a social mission that is being driven by what we call like a welfare logic and prescriptions that come from very social welfare institution collides or is combined with a market logic. And when you have like these combinations of forces within an organization, that triggers some friction and some innovation as well in terms of structures. But we had an exchange with Bacq, and I hope everybody can see it, about how one then implication and application of what could be found in social enterprises could be elevated for bigger corporations that of which these days many actually engage in responsible governance and so on. I'm happy to be in touch with whoever is interested in that topic, and I'll echo what Lucy said as well in terms of putting you in touch. Right, I'm representing tonight the management and entrepreneurship department. We're a huge group. Colleagues do research on bigger corporations, strategy, organizational theory, organizational behavior. That's more the psychology of organization, as well as international business. Right, and within entrepreneurship and the social, you have crowdfunding, you have the identity of the founders. There's really a a richness of research within all of our departments. So use us as, you know, contacts and connection points if that helps your purpose. Absolutely.
Okay, thanks. Sophie, I see your responses to the other questions. So I think because they were more specific, I'll hopefully the people in the webinar can see that. If not, we'll follow up and make sure they get the answers to those. At this point, I don't think there were any other. Chloe, did you see any other more general questions?
So there's just one more question, and I can read it really quickly. It's
Okay.
for all the panelists. So does the law of quantum physics apply to the research process? For example, that you need to have your eyes fixed on well-defined goals and that methods/pathways shall come to you? Or is it always important to have planned well in advance? What has worked for you? And I know that's a good question. I can reread that as well if you need me to.
Do you
I
want
can
that
start,
re- Yeah, why don't you reread
so
it,
I
Chloe?
take the question to be like, when you're working on a research project, sort of, do you know how it's going to play out in advance? Do you plan everything out and then just like knock down the pins? In my experience, that's very rare. That's not how it works for me. You know, I think of a project as typically resulting in a series of papers that answer very specific questions. And some people I know and admire very much plan out in advance exactly what questions are going to answer and what data they're going to use. But that's really never worked out for me. Things change as I'm doing it. I learn things along the way. I realize I wasn't asking quite the right questions, that there's much more interesting things happening, or there's some surprises. And I think some amount of flexibility is important when you realize you didn't quite understand what you were studying.
Any
I
other
would,
thoughts? Go
yeah,
ahead,
I would
Sophie.
agree with that, but I would also emphasize the importance of research design, right? So that's something you would learn in school, and you know, obviously plans change and designs, you know, may need to pivot or even, you know, change, or you may need to have the opportunity to break out your one big research project in a series of smaller ones, and that has happened to me as well. But ideally, more than well-defined goals, you would have you know, an appropriate, they fit together, right? My tools, my theories, and my methods, they fit with one another. So for a set of hypotheses, I would have data that would match the question that I'm asking, and I would have appropriate methodology to answer that question, right? So there is always a plan A, of course, that may evolve, but it's not like, okay, let's see where life brings us. Right, so there's a bit more intentionality to start with, but I totally agree on the flexibility aspect that Dan shared.
Yeah, I totally agree with Dan and Sophie. Yeah, in the sense that we need to have some flexibility in terms of the research. And I know some of the people doing the design science aspect, they have the well-designed plan for the project, especially for those ones who are writing the grant applications. But you know, for the research, the most interesting part of research is that you don't know what kind of thing you're going to encounter during along the road. So maybe some of other aspects or findings may becomes more interesting or more important at that moment, and you should proceed in that direction. Yes, you can stick with your plan, but what if something more interesting, more important? Why not just go forward for that? And in addition to that, once you have the outcome of the research, the result, that is not the end of story. You know, our goal is to publish papers. Publication takes a long time. Usually it takes years. And along this revision and under review process, there are going to be a lot of things happen. And in order to incorporate those new features, new ideas, and the new aspect into your research and make your research work more valuable, you have to incorporate those things, and that is out of the plan. You don't know, and this kind of uncertainty, don't you feel that is the beauty of the research?
Yeah, I think all three of you brought up some really incredibly important points. Is that it's important to have a plan, but rarely does research just go according to plan, and that's part of the fun part of it. You know, as Lucy mentioned, There's a long time when you're getting the research done and the paper written. Then there's a whole review process, and you're often out presenting your research. And sometimes the suggestions and the ideas of either your colleagues here at Kelley or people at other universities are what strikes and maybe even turns the paper into a very different paper. And that, and sometimes is scary, but it's also a lot of fun too. So one enjoyable thing is, yes, research sometimes is pretty solitary, but in many times it is very engaging with your colleagues, and it's just a lot of fun to work together. Well, I see we're close to the end of time, so I'm going to make a few closing comments. First of all, if you or if anybody else that you might know who might be interested in this kind of research panel, we do have another one tomorrow, and it will have faculty from the accounting department, Lori Bacq, from marketing, Ram Shrift, and from the operations management side of ODT, as Lucian said, she's from the information systems side, and that'll be Jonathan Helm. So it's kind of a different group tomorrow, same time. If you're interested, or if you know somebody and want to recommend, there is another opportunity to see this. I do want to again thank Bree Josephie, Ben Taylor, Chloe Storm, and particularly thank our three panelists, Sophie Bacq, Dan Sachs, and Lucy Yan. I hope this gave you all a great idea of some of the research that's going on. If you are interested, we will try to get, you can obviously reach out to individual faculty, but we will try to get ways that through the undergraduate program, we can get you funneled in the right direction. If you're interested in either have more questions or are interested in research or interested in the doctoral program. So thanks so much, and I hope you all have a good remainder of your evening.